talking, start doing. Start doing.
You're looking to be more creative and innovative?
Here on the beats.
And one of the keys to unlocking your potential is an entrepreneurial mindset. I like to say permission granted. No one is successful overnight.
Keep on keeping on.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are at in the world, and welcome to day 25 of 31 Days to PADITU with me, Sean Griffin. Thanks for being here. Hey, yesterday we had a great conversation with Mustanzer, who's stuck in Oslo. Poor guy, you know, there's worse places to be, I think. And he asked a question that really drove to designing your own life. And so I want to talk a little bit before we get into our great guest today, a little bit about how you go about designing your own life. If we can move to the vision board, Amy, that would be fabulous. So design, pick that up, eraser, design your life. Let's say that you want to write, that you have great skills at writing, but you've never pursued it. You've taken a traditional path, you're working in your jobs, and you just in the back of your mind have this idea that you would like to be a writer. It's a hobby. You sit on the side, you're writing. You also have a family, and in this case, we'll say you're a mother of a home with also a job. And so, but in your mind and in your dreams, you want to write a book. You want to become a writer. And so, hold on one second. I'm getting a message from my producer. Oh, sorry. I thought, Amy, you were contacting me. So you want to design your life. You want to be a writer. You have never taken the steps to move forward in doing this. So what I'm going to talk to you about right now is how to do this, or how to think about designing your life. And in this case, it's a woman who wants to be a writer, who has a family and a full-time job. So what I would do is I'd think about steps you can take to start writing, steps to write. What this means for me, if I was you, I would be focused on setting up time in the morning. Time in the morning, because mornings when it's quiet. This could be early morning, 5 a.m. Right? So you set your time to do your writing in the morning and start getting into a habit, a practice of writing and writing. When I write my books, I outline the entire book, a whole collection of concepts on articles, and then I kind of start assembling it and writing in pieces and chunks. The key thing, though, is to get into a pattern and a practice of writing over and over again. We're still designing your life. So now that's a new behavior pattern. You're going to start writing. You know what you find, though? You need to be healthier, right? You need to be healthier. So get a workout in there. We got to get a workout in. That workout, let's say that workout is at 6:30, just before the kids start getting up and things start moving in the house. Now we got to work out. This is how you do it. You got to schedule your time. And I think not a lot of people sit and actually think about, what am I going to do today, and start creating a regular schedule and pattern that's going to help you be more efficient and more productive. Now, in the morning, you probably have family time, right? You got to go to work. Got to go to work, your regular job. Here's the thing I would start doing, and this is what I try to coach different people on when I'm working with them, transitioning from one work to another reality, or what they really want to create in their life. Can you get that? And today you can do this easier, and this was always my question. How many days can you get your boss, or your people you work with, your employers, to agree to let you work from home? So work from home. Boom. All of a sudden, you just got flexibility in time and how you produce your time, how you're able to get work done. You know, you can do more in a day than you realize. A day is not 8 hours. It's actually 24 hours. And think about your day in 24-hour chunks. Get your sleep in, but at the same time, what can you accomplish within that 24 hours, right? So working from home gives you flexibility, which then gives you more time to do what? Right. That's right. Spend some time writing. Book 1 hour, 30 minutes of writing. in addition to working from home, adding it to your working from home, when those days you work from home, spend more time writing. The more time you can spend writing, the more habitual it become, and the more practice and easier it will become to write. The challenge with writers is that they write every once in a while. Many of them, aspiring writers, they write at times and it's not consistent. Creating a consistent flow is important. Shoot, I can't remember his name right now. It's he lives in, well, anyway, many of the greatest writers spend and secure their time in the morning to write, and then that's their writing time, and then come back to it in the afternoon to reflect upon it. I'm designing my life here to be a writer now, remember. Now, when I come back and there's family time, what I want to do here is make sure that the balance of my workload and my chores when I get home, or the activities that I need to do, are balanced. So I get more time to focus on what I need to do with my life. So when I got family time, but it's also my time. My time. And this is important. So family time and my time. My time is when I'm able to relax, have my own space, sit quietly, think and process what is it what do I need to focus on? Processing what I've been writing. Maybe epiphanies will come out and all of a sudden you realize, wow, that's a book, that's an article, that's something I can do to get this published. I'm working on being a writer. I get these new ideas. What do I have to do? I have to do research. Never been published before, right? Publishers, self-publishing. Options that are available for me in terms of how to go about publishing my work, finding different people who've been successful at publishing their work, and maybe you start with articles, you start with your own blog post, you start with, whatever it is that's going to work for you to get your writing and post it. Your own website, your own blog post, Medium, whatever it is for you, start getting your writing out there. But researching different publishers and different places that you can work from, that you can get gigs from, that you can get opportunities to get paid to get published from, or get published but not paid, but get your work exposed. It's a process, right? You're designing your life. You're designing your life to become a writer. What you want to do is rinse and repeat. This is how it works. There's no quick solution to this. It's a constant process to continually work within your existing life and what you're currently doing as you work to redesign it. In this case, we were a writer. We're trying to get somebody to move to a place where they're becoming a writer, practicing the writing, setting clear times when you're going to do the writing, working from home as much as possible. Working from home gives you that flexibility and gives you ability to find downtime, to relax, actually be more productive over time. Those people who are working from home is new, trust me, after 20 plus years of working from home, I've learned, or working from wherever I'm at actually, I've learned I can be far more productive and I can use more of my day to get more done. Well, this is a starting point to think about. Again, this was a story of somebody who is trying to become a writer. Not trying, they're becoming a writer. They're taking the steps to become a writer and adjust their life and design their lives to be more of a writer. It doesn't happen overnight, so there's no quick, easy solution to this. It's going to take time, particularly if you're starting from a hobby of being a writer to being an actual published writer. Never ever give up. You can do it, and you can design your own life. Okay, Amy, who's our first guest? Ian.
Greetings and hello.
Greetings to you, my friends. How are you doing today?
I'm all right, although apparently I'm phasing in and out, but we'll work with the camera.
So am I. Here we go. We'll do it together.
Yeah, no, thank you. For some people watching, it might be too early in the morning, but you never know.
I don't need to make people sick. Sorry out there, everybody. I promise I won't do that again. So Ian, you've been running a large mentor network, database of mentors and businesses around the world, supporting businesses. You've been involved in a lot of community development work. You're headquartered here in DC, Washington, DC. You've been a mentor for DC Startup Cup, but also you have been involved in Burning Man for many, many years, and
Actually, it's fairly recent on that, only about 6 or 7 years.
many more years
And
than
I'm old enough I'm old enough that now counts as recent.
Right. Well, you weren't there at the first one on the beach. You mean in California? I get it.
No, I showed up at the Playa in 2013 because I have a long history of being somebody who can look at chaos and keep it in order without killing the chaos. And a friend of mine who runs the camp that I co-run with him now, he watched me do that, like, in a chaotic situation where I was able to keep things moving without killing the spirit. And he said, "We need you." So that's what brought me out to.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised, and that is a real talent. I'm making a note over here on the side, working in chaos, because I get like centered in chaos. I get really centered, but
the challenge is, and a lot of entrepreneurs have this challenge, is that there's a lot of people who are really who are comfortable when like lots of things are happening, but when and it's good to be the firefighter when there's a fire. But sometimes there are some people, and I've worked with some of them, and I've coached some of them, who they find that they're better at being firefighters than, we'll call the other thing, architects, or people who can sort of plan and design and work in the quiet. And you need both skills.
Sure.
And I have found people, I've employed people who I was like, okay, you don't want to do anything unless there's a little bit of chaos. And I need to stop you from creating the chaos so that you can be in the middle of it. It's okay, like I will point you at chaos when we find it. That's good. That's fine. But there is sometimes a habit of entrepreneurs to create chaos because it's where they're most comfortable, which sometimes it's because it's where they're the center of attention, which is the really negative. But the more moderate version is it's where they're most comfortable, and that's not always the best.
I guess I was thinking about it a little different, but you're bringing up a really good point. That's not where I was going. So I'm making another note over here where I have my Burning Man question, which really relates to entrepreneurship. But I'm going to go back to the chaos piece here, because there is a difference, right? There are people who thrive in chaos, but it's because the chaos is kind of makes everybody crazy, right? And then they throw fire on it or gasoline on that chaos sometimes and make it worse and more intense, versus a situation where you can see clearly what needs to be done to get through it and then move it to and where you're actually coming out on the next level, right? So there's a centeredness is what I've noticed. And I don't, for me, chaos, if I'm there, I'm there, but it's not really, it's opportunity, but it doesn't last for long, right? Usually the chaos. And so, here's my question, because I have a question for you. So how can someone, an entrepreneur, right now, we're definitely in a chaos period. We're in chaos, but there's more opportunities than ever. How can an entrepreneur, a business builder, gain clarity and focus within the chaos and then move forward clearly and knowing that it could change along the way, but just getting that kind of clarity and then knowing how to move forward within the chaos? How can an entrepreneur do? What advice do you have for that?
Well, so some advice involves the first few minutes of this show, where you talked about sort of setting time aside to write. So the way so one piece is about plans. So I run what looks like a business plan competition, but isn't. We don't have winners. But what we do is we get people to write a plan, and then we have a pool of about 1,000 folks around the globe who've built, managed, or invested for-profit social enterprises. All of our companies have to have a social or environmental mission baked into how they make money, but still entrepreneurship.
Totally.
And sometimes people say, why do I need a plan? I don't need a plan to raise money. I just need a pitch deck. Pitch deck is designed for the person in front of you who may or may not give you money. It's similar to a plan. It has much of the same information, one hopes. Otherwise, you're deceiving somebody, possibly yourself. But a plan is something you check in with 6 months, 12 months, like every year you get together with your team and you say, oh, okay, what's different? If nothing has changed from your plan, let me know. We can call Ripley's Believe It or Not together. But the question is, why did it change? Right? What happened? well, I used to just say, or you're lying to me, but then I moved to, we're calling they're not together because some entrepreneurs get
It's a much more gracious approach.
Why did the changes happen? Maybe they changed because you got a better opportunity. Maybe they changed because, entrepreneurship is a moving target. Things are always happening. But taking the time to, the technical term is second order effects. What happens because you did a thing, right? So you solve the problem in front of you, and then this may create additional problems. The world is different now that you've done X, and it's a choose your own adventure, except that there's a lot of other people reading the same book, choosing other pages. And so thinking about what happens and tracking what happens, right? Because you don't always know, particularly if you're new at, like, a lot of entrepreneurs have never done what they're doing before. So they don't actually know, but they do a thing following not just the immediate result. Like, we got more customers, but as it turns out, they were only short-term customers who were only interested in that particular sale. Or we got a certain amount of customers, but those customers stayed with us, right? And how do you track? Like, we've got data on technically more than 10,000 sort of mentor-entrepreneur interactions, and 2 data sets that are strong, one at 7,000, one at 2,000. So I can tell you things like, in a business plan, risk assessment. I'm answering your question. All right, go back. Focus.
I'm going to rewind it back. This is the mindset issue. What you're talking about is the technicality of it.
So
I want to talk about the mindset. In your mind,
mindset.
How can I think different than I would, historically? Most people, a majority of people in a chaos situation can't think straight. They're confused. Their fear factor comes in. There's no capacity to process what's really happening, and then they start making up things, and it's the worst case scenario. And we see the worst of it, or the best of it, on the internet right now, where people are just making up shit, right? And their fears, and then they're fed. They're being fed, and so the question is, some entrepreneurs are really good at this, and I think 31 Days to PADITU is a prime example of when I just got really centered and said, "What do we do? This is what we do," and we went forward, and here we are. Good to see you. But what in this, it's a mindset issue. And most of what we've been getting to at the heart of it, it's mindset, heart, determination. How can somebody get their thinking in a place where they can stay centered in chaos like you do? So what do you do when you're at Burning Man and there's just, it's crazy, right? It's insane. And but yet you're still focused and you're getting what you need done, even though all this stuff's happening around you. How do you do that?
Okay. So, at Burning Man, so a lot of people go to Burning Man specifically to not have to do the kind of things that someone running a company has to do. But for example, one of the things is we make a point, those of us who are sort of leadership of the various camps, of making sure our people are fed and have enough water and have enough shade. You're out there, it's 105 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's, there are 50, 60 knot winds. Like, the weather is actually dusty. Yeah, and so that's the essential thing, and making sure everybody has a role of understanding what are the critical things. So you might want to go out and party or do whatever and not be very attentive to details. But in our camp, there's always somebody whose job it is to make sure that the kitchen is being taken care of, that the food and water nothing really much happens to the shade unless there's a storm, but that the food and water are being maintained and kept cold, and that we have an understanding, and it doesn't always fall on the leaders. When our camp has failed and when other camps have failed, what happens is the people in charge don't delegate well enough, and so that the leaders get burned out because they're leaders, so they make sure that the food and water is clean, but then they don't get to do any of the other things, and also there's only so many hours in the day. I think more than 24 Burning Man, but that's a separate issue. And so having a plan in advance, like, okay, you're coming here. So those of us who go out for build, we're there for like 2 or 3 weeks. The party people are there for about a week. So a lot of us who are sort of putting it all together are there for much longer, and we're burned out by the time the party people show up. So everybody has a clear understanding, like, today is your day that you are responsible for making sure that these other 50 people have good food and water and other things, but we'll go with that. And that it is delegated and everybody understands. And that when we choose our team members, when we choose the members of our camp or the members of our company, that they are folks who understand what are the essentials. There's stuff that you want to do. There's stuff in a business you want to work on. There's stuff at a Burning Man camp that you want to go to. But what are the core principles that you're standing on? So, you were talking about family time.
This is important. You're
prioritizing your family, your health.
You're prioritizing, though, what's most important. And not all chaotic situations have predictability to it. Like at Burning Man, you have some level of predictability, particularly after doing it many times, right? Where what you have to plan for. But in an environment like we're in now, or as you discussed earlier, an entrepreneur starts moving forward, introduces a new product, it just means the adventure changed. It's a new reality, it's a new world, and maybe it unleashes chaos because it grows so fast. You got some like hyperbolic growth, let's say. It's still a mindset situation that we're talking about, which is in that situation, having the centeredness to be clear, to understand what needs to be done and how to do it, or as you said, prioritizing the most important actions to take and then moving forward. This is a mindset issue, right? This is not like, would you agree?
Yes. And but what your values were before, what your priorities were before the chaos are still often your priorities in the chaos. Just the form of how you deal with them is different. So, for example, I have a good friend who is currently managing a hotel of high-risk individuals for COVID and a variety of other things. And she refers to it as she's now the bandit queen, the pirate queen of this hotel. And she's very, very good, since everything has fallen apart, and making sure these people are living, it's food and water, and keeping them clean and keeping them alive. And normally there would be sort of the focus would be on the group meetings and getting people through their issues and getting them to the next stage. But now the focus is like, all right, it's always that these people need to not die. And that was previously, it was a long-term issue. Now it's a short-term issue.
Right.
And her challenge, she's good at that. She's very good at that. Her challenge is figuring out how to also keep the long-term in play in the chaos, because the decisions you make in chaos are what people see. Right? Something bad happens and somebody does something that isn't necessarily remarkable, but they stand out. They did, they ran towards the fire to get somebody out. Like, you pull a little creek out. Like that one thing will define somebody for years. It may not be their whole character. It's just what they saw in the moment. There's a lot of folks, particularly in the military, that are really good at training people. Like, you have these core values. Just because stuff is, in their case, I guess, literally blowing up around you, don't lose the values. Take care of your teammates. Take care of the thing. If you're running a company, what's your product? What's your who are your customers? Make sure your customers are taken care of, because, as you know, a pissed off customer causes more harm than a friendly customer causes good.
Right.
Because the friendly customer rarely,
unless they're ecstatic. What you're talking about here, I'm going to stick on this subject, is character.
This is about keeping your values in mind.
But it's character, right? And you can't. But there's a character trait in there, right? And you can't train character. Character is part of who you are. I can't train somebody to be who they're not. Right?
Most countries' militaries and would disagree with you. So it's
they sure. I didn't say if you take
and a lot of other institutions, right?
You can first and then rebuild them up. But in general, your character is there, and I would argue that their character
parents of teenagers would disagree with you.
But their character may still be there, but they changed for the situation when the military potentially. Like, I can't train somebody's character. I can't do it. I've never been able to get. I can train them skills and techniques and methods, and I can train them those, but I can't train them to be a good person. Either they are or they're not.
It's a semantic difference, but I would disagree with you.
You would? Okay, great. Why? So you can train character.
So it's in those that we'll go with churches. All right. Or we'll go with, so when I am doing leadership development coaching, so yeah, some people are just, it's the 10-80-10 rule, right? Like 10 people are gonna see and do the right thing without it being about themselves. 10% of the people are going to be bullies or evil or wrong or whatever. And 80% of the people are just going to sort of follow what's in front of them. That's the slightly easier path. Those numbers are arbitrary, but it's some small percentage of people are always going to do the right thing. Some small percentage of the people are always going to do the selfish thing. And most people will do what the structure leads them to do. That doesn't mean they're sheep. They're not, it just means they're not going to take the effort because they're busy, they're whatever. So if you create structures where they are reminded what's important, right? I've watched people change over time. I've watched people make better decisions, ask better questions, where maybe they had the character, maybe there's a semantic thing, but it wasn't that important to them, right? Like, people know don't hurt somebody else, right? But it doesn't occur to them how their actions, most people who do stupid things around racism or sexism, some people are actively jerks. Most people are just following the culture, and once they know that their actions are causing harm to other people, generally do less of them, right? And conveying to them in a way that's not condescending, because that never helps.
Is that behavior, Ian, or is that character? Like the character.
I think over time it becomes character. I think over time, so I don't think there's like an inherent character that you're born with that never changes, because who I am now and who I was 30 years ago, the decisions aren't that different, but the core from which I'm making the decisions has changed, right? Like the behavior is what you do, but character is why you do it. And the reasons why I do certain things have changed over 30 or 40 years.
Absolutely. I mean,
presumably,
it's just interesting, right? So I like it that let me go back to where I was, because that was an interesting discussion about character. So you think you can train it, or over time it can change if people have the will or desire to change that, and can see and have some kind of empathy to be able to
not to sound too much like a counselor. They have to change themselves, but you can help them do that.
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting. Okay. But let's go back, because we're running out of time. What I was trying to get at with Burning Man, and the question I have is, and because you're really in this area right here, particularly with your mentor network and the Burning Man context, lots of volunteerism going on around both those environments. Mm-hmm. Are you seeing more people right now interested in helping, or are there more people wanting to volunteer and be supportive? Or are you finding that it's getting harder to find people to volunteer, particularly for startups, right? Helping support startups like we do or we have. And what are you seeing out there in terms of like gathering people together who usually historically have been willing to help and support? Or are you finding that more difficult or easier?
Both. So for my mentors, they are almost always people who have already built businesses. They're people who are moderately successful or very successful. It's folks all over the world, and it's folks who have, as it were, chosen their own lives to a certain degree, because a lot of what we do is peer-to-peer. So we get folks who are addressing similar challenges but not competing for the same customer. So they're generally an entrepreneur who's slightly further along than the entrepreneur they're working with, because they both know what they're in the thing. So they are they're still working. Like they're not their life, they're still working on what they're working. But the
reason I ask is I'm finding more and more.
I would say it's about the same. Although the money, people are less have because I do small dollar fundraising has been challenging, because people who would normally send $250 a year or $500 a year are being perhaps rightly conservative about it, because they don't know if they're still going to be employed. People who no longer need to worry about being employed, that money's still there. But the folks who, my charitable giving has gone down, because I'm concerned about, I used to make a living flying to different countries and explaining how what they were doing was done in other countries, not dissimilar to you. And I don't do so much of that this spring.
Yeah, I mean, what I found though is that people are busier than they were even before. Like most of the people we've been engaging with, I've been engaging with, and I've been going my way back machine. That people are much busier and harder to get their time overall than it was before, and then the realities of having to like change their schedules and so forth. It's just been interesting. I was wondering what you were seeing out there, because
we started we've been a virtual program almost entirely since 2005 or 6.
Yeah.
So we're already set up. Like our program is set up not to take people's time away from running their companies and to be efficient. So that we have a lot of peers, a lot of wonderful programs like
Where can
yours.
people go? Where can people go to learn more?
That
Where
will
can
add
people-
more value, but will take more time. We're already set up to be really efficient about both the mentors and the entrepreneurs. That was our goal before all of this.
Yeah.
And I think that's been helpful now. In fact, we've had feedback from reviewers, from entrepreneurs saying, I didn't have the time to do this other program run by friends of mine, which is an amazing program, which they would have gotten more out of had they had the time to do it, but it would have taken more of their time.
Right.
But we are deliberately, I have built 12 companies, enterprises, some for profit, some non-profit on purpose. It's that middle group that keeps me working. And that drove home to me, do not take people out of running their company. Like, it's one of the things I love about your program is you're really good about that.
Yeah.
And other programs, their total value add, if they're a good program, will be there, but they'll take people sort of out of their space. And like, that's not an option right now.
Yeah, totally. And I think, where can people go? Ian, where can people go to learn more about your mentor network?
mentorcapitalnet.org.
It's up there now.
It's almost like Amy knew I was going to say that because that showed up before I said it.
She's psychic and she's amazing. She has superpowers all over. Ian, thanks for being here. We're not sure what we're going to do after 31 days, but when we do what our next thing is, we'll have you back again.
All right.
Keep up the great work. Thanks. Ian. Well, here's the question. Is character built in? Is it part of who you are? And is it changeable? Or can it be trained? That's the question. All right. Who's our next guest, Amy? Norman.
Good morning.
You're like a black shadow, my friend.
I know. I don't know how to. Oh, you know what? Maybe if I do it.
Yeah, there you go.
Way.
That's better.
All
Yeah.
right.
I can see you.
Now, what I have to do is I have to move.
You're looking good, Norman.
I have to move this over here. It's because of the lighting that I have.
Hey,
So,
Norman.
it looks like I just woke up.
I couldn't see you.
Yeah, it looks like I just woke up. However, I didn't. I've been up for quite a while.
It looks like you've been working out.
This is the new look. So going back to your previous conversation, this is chaos.
It's chaos. Let me ask you, do you think that character can be trained or is it set?
It's a really perfect question. Yeah. So there is a thing about DNA, about how you're programmed and how that changes. We know through science that people can change. The whole area of psychoanalysis and psychiatry and sociology, and to some extent anthropology, shows that it can change. Individually, the character, if a person has a certain disposition to acting in a way, it's going to take an extreme event to change character. However, mindsets can change because we learned that through the writings of Jung and Freud. We understand that happens. So there's a real depth. Being an educator, I'm always of the belief that everything changes. The world is fluid. It works in circles. It spins and it changes. And you bring in pieces. It's not linear. And character is not linear. Character actually bumps into chaos. Nothing is ever smooth.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying, Norman, and I didn't know we'd end up on this. That's the beauty of the show.
Yeah, I never thought about this.
To me, character is important, and here's what I've learned. Literally, hiring hundreds of people, firing a few now and again, letting them go, transitioning, people moving on, literally hundreds of people at this point. And I found that character, if you interview for character, like the people you interview, that you can hire a better person by focusing in on people who are mission driven, right? That look above and beyond themselves, that are focused on making a difference in the world, that are looking for being part of something bigger or important to them, that it's not driven by money. Those character traits versus somebody else who you can hire who has a different, may shine and look beautiful and say all the right things, but if you look under it, you look through it, you see their character's not. They're looking out for themselves. It may be a stepping stone. They're looking for something else they can go for. So Ian thinks it can be trained, or you can train it.
I believe they can be influenced.
Change under extraordinary events, life-altering events, near-death events are prime examples of where character can shift.
Correct.
But
I can answer that.
The person has to want to change, right? They have to want to change.
So that's the key.
And then
People have to want to.
Yeah.
If you don't want to, nothing works. You have to absolutely want to. So when I was, my background, and I came out of the financial industry, out of Wall Street specifically, and banking. Everybody that I hired, which was hundreds, if not, maybe it went into 1,000 people, I don't know, because I worked for $5 and $6 billion operations as their CFO and their chief compliance officer, and I was bringing in a lot of people all over in tremendous amounts of years. What I interviewed for when I did it was the character. It was the ability to see how they deal with stress. There's nothing more stressful than dealing with economic swings, whether they're up or they're down. You can get elated, you can get depressed, and it can happen in the same day. It is a spontaneous event. The ability for the character to be able to assimilate that is what I look for in hiring. So what is critical path? What is stress motivation? How do you deal with it? When I interviewed for executives, managers, even supervisors, I didn't go below supervisor, that was left to the department heads. My greatest question is, if you own this firm, how would you deal with stress? That's the question I asked them. And they said, what do you mean? I don't own the firm. I said, I hire entrepreneurs. I said, if you don't think this is your company, then I can't use you. This has to be yours, and you have to be the owner, and you have to run your department like you own it.
No,
and that's what I do.
Let me ask you a question here, because so I'm a person, I'm going through life, I run into walls, things don't go always the way I want them to go. It's a behavior pattern that keeps coming up for me. Like I see it throughout my life. Okay, I'm running into that same situation. How can somebody, what advice do you have for people who are watching if they want to raise their own awareness of their own behavior patterns, particularly sabotaging behavior patterns, to want to make the change, to go through the hard work of having to look inside and make that change myself? How can somebody do that who maybe isn't that aware or isn't paying attention? Or how can somebody do that? How can somebody become more aware of their own sabotaging behaviors or ways that aren't helping them reach their full potential?
The only way that I know that I've had success in that area was a team approach.
Okay.
The ability to have other inculcations from peers. How is your department running? So as a prime example, I took the managers of customer service, operations, technology, IT, finance, accounting, and every Friday at 7:30 in the morning, I held my meetings. And they would say, "So early?" I said, "Yes. I don't care if you don't go to sleep. That's when the meeting is." You have to be able to be there, and your job is to make sure that this firm is directed, that this firm is going to get goal-directed behavior. That's what we're after. And you have to pick up each piece. You have to be able to focus on it beyond your own department's work, because operations will affect the customers, which will affect the revenue, which will affect IT, because they need other aspects of, of software to be able to be delivered. We had so many different interactions of hedge funds and money managers, and they needed different disciplines to figure out what they're going to trade. And because of that, we had to have specific programs to handle that, and we did that.
You're talking a lot about culture here too. We just
Culture. So that's it.
Culture.
It's about culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. Without culture, and I'm going to give you a prime example of that. I worked for a Japanese firm called Kokusai. It was the 35th largest broker-dealer in the world. I was their CFO and compliance officer. The first thing I did when I got that job is I went to the Japan Society to learn Japanese culture. And then I went to a language institute so I could study the language, so I could read and write Japanese. Because you can't be running a firm if you can't communicate. And you have to communicate in the language that it was written in.
There's intentionality, I think, in what you were talking about, the 7 a.m. meetings. So I think assimilating the culture, different cultures, is one thing, but setting and creating a culture, and you were setting a tone with that 7 a.m.
I set the culture in the companies. Absolutely right.
That's different than assimilating into a culture. It's setting the culture, and you set the culture. You were setting.
I set the culture, correct. Yeah. I set the culture in the firm that I worked for. However, in order to set a culture, you have to understand what sits on top. What sits on top is the firm. Then inside the firm, because it's international, it's in 60 different countries. Or 20 different countries. You have to understand the culture of the firm before you can set the culture in your area, because it has to blend. There has to be a commonality. There has to be the lifeblood of that culture of the firm. You can't be a maverick. That's the thing about decentralization. There are decentralized leadership and there's centralized leadership. In certain areas, you have to be decentralized. In other areas, you have to be centralized. You have to know that going in so that you can set the tone. In small firms that are consulting firms or product-driven firms, you have to know who is my customer base and what do they want? What is their culture? Because their culture is going to dictate what they need. And so that's what Apple did. That's what Google did. When Apple was first starting out, they put their computers in schools. They gave it to them. And when those kids graduated and they went into business, all they wanted was Apple because that's what they knew.
That's right.
And they did it with art. And they did it because it had those cards that you could draw with, and it became and they became an order taker. And that's what you want. That's what IBM was in the beginning. They were order takers.
But there's a difference. There's a big difference between IBM's culture and Apple's culture, right? And so
totally.
It was, and whether or not it was intentionally designed at first with Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, both of who I've met and knew.
It was purposeful and intentional.
A thing to set the culture, but there was, with startups and new businesses, I think it's important for them to think about the kind of culture they want to create and what that looks like particularly as it relates to anybody that they're hiring or bringing on board, because the people you hire will create your culture for you if you don't. And so there's got to be an intentionality around it a little bit if it's not established, right? If you don't have an established culture, you need to establish it and understand it.
Correct.
And communicate it to anybody who hires, and then use that in your interviewing process to make sure you're hiring those people that fit that culture. Right?
Well, that is getting to the meat of the whole area. When I hired people, what I did was I said, please tell me the last 3 books you read and what you got out of them. I wanted to know what they thought was important in their life, and that really affects culture. If they're reading Stephen King or they're reading Machiavelli, there's a difference. I want to know what they're reading.
Yeah.
Even though they're both well written, to say the least,
Right.
and Stephen King may be around long beyond we're gone. The point is, I need to know that, because what you are is part of your culture. And so I asked these questions, and when I would finish the interview, the people would say, I'm not sure really what you want from me, but I've never been interrogated like this. And I said, this is an interview, it's not an interrogation.
Yeah.
Wow. And so that's what they used to say, because it's so important to understand you want no mistakes. There has to be no mistakes. You have to identify that stuff. And part of that, believe it or not, is the things that you do. When we were in Africa, a lot of the things that we did were to the culture.
Change behavior. I'm always about, what do we have to do to move behavior change?
Even more so, because these are underserved and underprivileged, and their brain power, their gray matter is there. They're just not exposed. When I had a conversation with them offline, they understood everything I said. It wasn't like it was a language barrier. There wasn't an intellectual barrier. All they had was they didn't know how to build their skill sets. All we did was show them that pathways to success are about communication and building skill sets and taking action now.
And believing in yourself. And believing in yourself that you can.
You have to believe in you. If you don't believe in yourself, no one will believe in you. If I didn't go, I'm a professor now. So if I don't tell students that the most important thing that you're ever going to learn is you, if you don't understand you, how you're going to put all this knowledge that's coming in? You have to believe in you, your ability to comprehend. The first class I ever have with every single class that I teach. Why do some people make 40 million a year? Why do some people make 4 million a year? Some make 400,000, some make 40,000 with the same skill set. They all have the same degree. What is that about? How does that come about? And they have the same intellect, and they have the same capabilities. And we see it all over the world. We see incredibly wealthy people without formal education. They have more money than we can count. I'm around people. Everybody has a PhD. I'm around 200 people because I'm in many schools. Everybody has a PhD. Everybody is brilliant. Publish. And I don't think any of them have $250,000 in the bank, and I don't think any of them have ever earned more than $175,000. And they're brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. And they've written books and articles, and some of them have written so many things. And I'm with people that give the keynote address at the G20. World-class economists, one level below the Nobel laureates, and they should be. And they're not rich. They are brilliant, without a doubt. And you want to have a conversation with them, they could never run a business the way that you run a business. They don't have that character trait. And that's what we're talking about, character. And you have to want it. And the only way you get it is you have to get rid of whatever you have in there that's blockage. You have to know that. And so when I went through school, I took a lot of psychology and sociology, because if you don't do that and you don't understand the human condition, you're not going to be able to build character and show it.
Yeah.
You need to have everybody do better than you so that they remember you, sort of like a kid thanks his mom when he succeeds, or a coach. You know, a professional athlete goes and says, "Thank my coach and mom." You know,
Right.
dads don't count, mom counts.
Hey, Norman, this is great. And I think we got to do another one on culture and character here at another show.
Culture and character.
Because
So that's the mainstay of success, by the way.
oh yeah, what is
Culture and character are one of the main. It's the highway to success.
culture and
Character.
character is the highway to success.
It is. It truly is. I've never thought about it in those terms. You brought it out of me just now, because I never used that combination. And I know that's what happens with learning. You bring in knowledge right on the spot. That's how inventions happen. You
Right.
do things and say, I wasn't looking for this, and look. I mean, you know, they went to do a heart drug and they came up with Viagra, and now it's selling more than the heart drug. As a
Right.
matter of fact, it's too expensive to use it as a heart drug.
It was a
Because they're
side
making
effect,
more
right?
money selling it as
It was
a
a side effect. They're like, hey, this is a real problem we got over here. What's the side effect? Wait a minute.
yeah. I mean, go figure.
You had to bring Viagra into it, Norman. Hey, you had a couple minutes. Let's do some co-coaching. We got some more. We got some coaching. Some people putting some questions, and you want to do some co-coaching with me?
Yeah. Yes, I would love to.
Let's do it. Amy, what you got? I'll read them out loud, Norman. You say, "Do anything afraid." This is easier said than done. I wonder how you would advise to start doing that. Okay. Well, one step at a time. That's what you do. So one step at a time. What's important about doing it afraid is acknowledging and knowing, okay, I'm uncomfortable, I'm nervous, I'm afraid, and not letting it stop you and continuing to move forward. And the key here is you may only move an inch. What I didn't talk about is all those times I went and took a nap. I went to sleep. I was so frustrated. I was so scared that I actually went and took a nap. That's to reprogram and reboot my brain. 15, 20-minute nap, get back up, go back at it. So that's another technique you can use to, if you get to a point where you just can't go any further, that maybe you're close to tears. I've been there before, gone to the bathroom, cried, came back out, do it again. That you just got to keep trying. You got to take those steps. It's building a muscle. So your muscle of doing it afraid is not strong right now if you've never done this before. So just like working out, you got to start with light weights. You got to start with small steps. I used to do a test when I first was doing this, and I was afraid of spiders. Spiders gave me the creeps. Literally, I could sense them in the room. I'm like, and I couldn't sleep. It was terrible. Dumb. It's all in my mind, right?
No, acrophobia is real.
Well, yeah, it was real. I felt it. What I started doing was paying more attention to spiders. I started playing with them a little bit in their webs and seeing how they would act and behave. And I started seeing and predicting. And that's how I started overcoming the fear of spiders. Do I still get a little uncomfortable around a spider? Yeah. But did I overcome it to the point where now I can go pick it up, put it outside and save it instead of squashing it and killing it? Yes. And so you start with spiders or whatever it is that you're afraid of and move to a place where you're trying to deal with that one step at a time. Again, if you are to the point of almost tears, go to bed, go to sleep. This is how I reboot myself. If I really am in a situation where it's too much, I literally go to sleep, go to bed, 10, 20 minutes, get back up. It's a great way to reboot your brain and come into a new place. Norman, what's your thoughts on this?
So I like what you said, and I have a different angle.
Great.
Only because of my background. So when you're afraid, fear is an emotion. You have to identify the fear. In order to identify the fear, you have to touch it. getting to the root of the root is the only way to tackle fear quickly. You don't want to be like a Woody Allen dealing with analysis for 27 years or more. You want to be able to get in there and just extract it.
Right.
Because in business, every moment of time potentially is money lost if you're not in the right focus.
It's a great point. I mean, fear is an emotion, one, and it's usually irrational, right? Unless it's like your life's in danger, right?
It's based on an emotion, and we'll say, if we're not afraid of it, it's irrational. To the person, it's incredibly rational, and you have to be able to make the rational irrational. You have to make that step. You have to take it out of the fear bucket and bring it into reality buckets. You have to transition that.
Right? It's something that when you're afraid of something, let's say I'm afraid of speaking. This is a good one. I'm afraid of
speaking. Great fear.
Right? And my fear is that, what's the fear that underlies that, right? I won't look good, right? I'm afraid of not looking good. I'm afraid that I'll mess up, right? Or I'll say too many times, whatever it is. And so it holds you back. What you're saying is understanding that fear is a critical component to this, and understanding my fear of the fear may be, I'm afraid of not looking good, right? And so therefore I'm not willing to go speak on stage. It could take a little while to figure that out. And you still, by going on stage and doing that speech, even if you're afraid, could potentially unlock the reason for the fear. What do you say to that?
It's right on, because what I tell my students, because I make them come up in front of the class and they say, I'm afraid of that. I said, great. So your assignment is go to Toastmasters. They're going to teach you how to public speak. Ronald Reagan once said that if a politician doesn't take acting lessons, they're a fool. I say, if business people do not take public speaking, they're making a grave mistake. And I use the word grave because it brings you down below the ground. You have to be able to be an air breather. It's very important that people understand what you're saying when you're a business person. It doesn't make a difference if you're independent or you're part of a team in a department for a profit or a not-for-profit. You have to be able to communicate.
Yep.
Public speaking is the key.
For sure. And so it's a great example because so many people are afraid to speak,
Well,
right?
You do that without even thinking about it. You see, it's part of your DNA. So all you do is you're always communicating, and
taken years, Norman.
I've seen you with your son in the with SEMA, and you're communicating. All you do is you bring that out to the audience because you own it internally.
That's right. But I think that I'm going to go back to this question. I think what you're saying is really valuable and people are following. But the question is, what can you do to take steps to overcome the fear and take action and do it afraid? And what I'm saying, and I want to be clear about, is small steps, right? It's a muscle you haven't been working. The more you can start taking those steps to strengthen that muscle of doing things while you're afraid, the easier it will become. It's just like putting yourself in uncomfortable positions. The more you get comfortable or put yourself in uncomfortable positions, the more comfortable you become being uncomfortable. It's no different than the fear. You just got to take small steps. And let me tell you, it's a muscle. And the more you exercise it, the better you'll become at it. And I think you mentioned that fear also can be a motivator, right? I have a saying.
You're not kidding. You have a fire at your ass. Believe me, you're motivated.
It's a motivator. So fear is a motivator. It's just like getting mad. When I get mad sometimes, I say mad isn't mad. Mad means make a difference because it can motivate me to do something because I'm mad about it and I want to see that change. Maybe it's an injustice. It needs to be rectified. It can drive me to action. When you find those moments that are motivating you to action, like in your life, like you're sitting there, you're reading something, you're upset by it, and you spring up out of your chair and you're going to take action. Pay attention to those moments because whatever is driving you to action in those moments, whatever's motivating you, do more of that, because that's what's going to get you to start taking action.
And you have to learn how to replicate it. You have to learn what got you out of that situation is you,
Mhm.
and replicate you all the time. That is the step to success, is the replication of you.
Replicate you.
Yeah.
That's powerful, man.
Yeah.
Norman,
Well,
our time's up.
I'm sorry?
You got a question or something? You have a question?
You're talking to Amy, right?
Talking to you, Norman. You have a question for me?
Oh, so I do have a question for you.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
This will be it. This is our time is run down. We're a little over time, but let's go, Norman.
Okay. When you know you're right and you don't get to success, what did you do wrong?
When I know I'm right.
You create
That
businesses.
doesn't happen many times, by the way.
It happens.
It happens to all of us. So okay, so
It happens all the time.
and I didn't get the success. Well,
not only didn't you get to success, you're wondering why it didn't happen when you did everything right. What is about doing everything right and just not getting it?
a lot of it's timing, I think, that I've found, where timing is a really critical component that I think people underestimate in terms of when they're starting an endeavor. And so for me, I have a futurist mindset. I see the future a lot, right? So like I can crystal ball it, and sometimes you can be too ahead of the future, right? Many times I've done everything right, everything's great, everything's successful, we're moving forward, but it's ahead of the time. The market's not there, the customer's not there, the technology capacity is not there. Has been part of the reasons that it hasn't worked. I think what I do, Norman, when I go into something, I go in and I work to go in unattached. So I'm not attached to the outcome.
Yes, you're not part of it. Thank you.
It's not, my identity's not associated with it. So I'm not, like, my identity isn't, even this PADITU with Sean Griffin, although it has my name in it, I'm not attached to it. What I am attached to is providing the best value I can for the, but I'm not attached to the outcome, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a hard thing for people. So it's and I also drive projects to the end, to its completion. In other words, I can't go any farther with it. It's done, right? Either it worked or it didn't. But I've literally done everything I possibly can do, at least that I've discovered I can do, that's reasonable. And what I do is I just drop it. It's time to stop. And then I go, okay, now I'm going to go focus on this over here. Because I generally have a list of things that I can start working on at any time. And so I'm
going to say something, which is not exactly what you probably want to hear. However, when you said that and you get to a point where you can't get any further, you don't drop it. You go find somebody that can take the ball and show you how to move that forward to perfection. For instance, you came to me, and together it was better than the independence of just you. We looked at how we're going to work with entrepreneurs in Africa to bring together a mindset, not the building of a business, the mindset to fruition. That's what we're looking for. And sometimes you bring it to the precipice, and then what do you do with it? And you have the ability to just grab somebody, myself for instance, and say, now what do we do? You know, I'm going to give you an example which is off the beaten path. Please don't take it as being too
go ahead.
People like Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci invented helicopters and submarines and battleships and tanks 500 years before they could be built, because they didn't have the technology to build it, but they can invent it. Running a business, if you invented IBM in the 13th century with computers and being able to do that, if you did Apple, if you did the building of a car, not the assembly line, the technology of the internal combustion engine in the 13th century. That's what people did. They didn't know what to do with it. Those things didn't just happen. It's because the technology at the time allowed it to happen. What I've seen with you, the reason I enjoy being around you, is that you bring the thinking, and then you want people to build it. And that's the entrepreneur that you bring out in the person. So I can see that. I can see beyond what you can do on how you influence people. And that's the power of what you bring to the table.
Well,
So I've learned from the time that we spent together in our interactions and our conversations, I can take what you build on Build a Business, and I can bring it to another level because my skill set is different than yours. And I can see that, and I'm able to explain it. That's why some people can do things that other people can't do, because they see it differently. Not better, not smarter, not richer. They just see it differently. You know, I used to say anybody can draw art like Van Gogh. The first thing is you have to be a little insane. You know, it helps.
it does help.
It does help.
Norman,
You know?
yeah, I mean, thank you very much, because one of the things that I cherish about you is that you do look at the world differently, and you articulate
I'm a teacher.
situations and examples that I may have done 100 times, and you see it in a different way, which brings
I do.
new light to me, and new insights to me. And I think that what's important for our audience out there is this: that you have to be open to those different insights. You have to be open to new perspectives that allow you to open your thinking. And something happened to me, Norman, after 9/11 as well, but with COVID-19, all of a sudden I just was like a child again. And all of a sudden I just realized I don't know anything. I don't know much. And I particularly don't know much about what's going to happen in the future here tomorrow. If we can think that far, that this is really an important characteristic. And I think that I've even gotten stronger and more open to different perspectives, and somehow been able to suspend judgment to where I can even entertain perspectives that I would have never entertained before. Doesn't mean I have to agree with it, but I can like bring it in and sit with it and process it. And so I think what you bring up is an important characteristic in me that allows for improved.
You are open to allow people to take, you are so open to allow people to take what you say and move it in a different direction.
Yeah.
And then you know how to own it. I tell my students, there is nothing in this class I'm going to teach you that you don't already know. However, I'm going to learn from you because I'm learning millennial. It's a knowledge base. It's different. It's different than the greatest generation or the other generations that exist, the X and the Y and the Z's. It's different. I learn. You can't be a consultant, a teacher, a supervisor without learning from the people that you're working with.
Right.
And if you're not open to that, it doesn't work.
Just in life, I mean, this conversation was just so important. It's not even work, right? It's just life. Being able to
It's life.
be more open.
It's
more
the essence, correct.
Particularly today, and I've said this before, and you know, there's lots of people out there. I'm an expert on this. I've been doing this for 30 years, and I just laugh. I'm like, we're in something that wasn't even around when you were a baby, so I don't think you're that much of an expert, right? And
right, exactly.
Just kind of getting off that perspective and saying it's not about being an expert. It's about being open and trying to learn, and then apply those learnings and share those with as many people as possible. That becomes the opportunity versus being able to have the answer.
And people that have advanced degrees, like doctorates and double doctorates and triple doctorates, their egos, I know these people, their egos get involved in something that is dysfunctional.
Yeah, yeah.
Nobody knows like them. And you see it in politics a lot. You see it in corporate. Look, GE was the greatest firm in the world. It was the greatest. Now it's a piece of shit because of management.
Kodak went away.
Kodak disappeared.
Oh,
Absolutely.
It happened.
Kodachrome was the greatest film. They didn't know how to take that and turn it into pixel. What the hell is wrong?
You laugh at this, Norman. I was graphically facilitating back in 1995, 96.
Right, before it was even thought of.
The executives from Kodak in Silicon Valley, and the outcome was go digital, do this, move away. And they just wouldn't. They knew what to do. They just wouldn't do it. It was a behavior challenge for them. They couldn't cannibalize their own. We're over time, Norman.
Yeah.
I love you so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Always enjoy it.
I can come see you in New York there sometime soon.
Yeah, anytime you want.
Thank you, buddy.
Right,
all right, everyone. Before I go, I want to announce Jody B. You are the winner of visual coaching from me. You'll be contacted soon, and we'll set that up. Can't wait to learn more about your business. That's it. We just finished day 25. That means we have 6 days left of 31 days to PADITU. I'll be back here, same PADITU time, same PADITU place. See you then. Thank you so much.
You got to never ever give up.